connected with Fitzroy?
Well, I've been living in Fitzroy, let me see, since I sort of came across Fitzroy. I lived in the suburbs, and then I went to Melbourne Uni, and then started living in Carlton and Fitzroy. And I think I've lived consistently in Fitzroy since 1995. In between Nicholson Street, or maybe I shouldn't say this, between Nicholson Street and Brunswick Street, so in a fairly busy part of Fitzroy, but we live in a quiet street, so it's been really fantastic. We live in a block of flats that have a real mixture of people who've lived in these flats for something like 20 years, and recent young people who've just moved in, you know, they're at uni, and so there's a really diverse lifestyle within our flats alone, and that's without going out to Brunswick Street. And you know, we've got this fantastic old lady who's been there since year dot, since the flats were built, and she sweeps. She comes out in her nightie, and she sweeps the floor, the concrete floor each morning. You know, she's having this battle with the birds who get the leaves off, you know, onto the concrete footpath, and she sweeps it all back. To the really young people who get home at 3 o'clock in the morning and put on the dryer machines and drive everybody crazy. So there's a whole mixture. But I've been working for Next Wave Festival since I think the beginning of this year. And Next Wave has been in Fitzroy since 1985, so it's a long time. And in the Triple R building, this is the building that we call it the Triple R building, I suppose, because when people say 31 Victoria Street, they normally go to Victoria Parade, which is where we are now, 31 Victoria Street in Melbourne. And I think Next Wave has done a lot of things within the city of Yarra and in Fitzroy in particular, but also across Melbourne. So things like 200 Gertrude Street and CCP being big venues for Next Wave activities. But we've just moved out of Fitzroy into Melbourne, just across the divide, across the street, really.
How come you moved out of Fitzroy?
Well, I don't know if you're aware of that building, the old Triple R building. It's a big old building, and there's a big alternative school, or school of alternative healing medicine stuff, and it's an expanding business. And it's a really nice building in another sense, because there's lots of arts-related organisations in it. You know, there's Miranda Brown Publicity, it was there, the Aboriginal Exchange, all these other, you know, I think contemporary music events was in there for a long time as well. So it was a real hub of activities. But we had restrictions with our lease arrangement. So this building came up and we were offered it. So it's a fantastic building, we're really pleased. And so it offers us a really good administrative home here. And also there's a gallery space downstairs and then a breakout space and rehearsal and performance. So in terms of just practicalities, it's a much better space. But now we're moving amongst the suit wearers rather than people who, you know, are Fitzroy people. So it's a very different feel. We certainly can't go up the road for the staff lunches that we used to go and have. And I just went to a restaurant just 2 nights ago on Brunswick Street, and they said, "Oh, you must be really busy at your work recently because we haven't seen you." And we said, "We've moved." So you just lose that local thing.
So the Next Wave will still be involved with Fitzroy Gallery?
Absolutely. So that's still happening a lot. We still get City of Yarra funding, which commits us to doing work within the City of Yarra and Fitzroy. I think is still very much, I'm sorry about my clogged upness, a hub for arts activities. So I think Next Wave has a big interest in, there's a lot of infrastructure for art to happen in Fitzroy still. So. But prior to coming to Next Wave, I used to work in community arts in the City of Yarra, which the City of Yarra is sort of a biggish city council since all the amalgamations, but predominantly it's sort of Fitzroy, Collingwood and Richmond are the main centres. I know it goes up to Clifton Hill and all those areas. But so we, I used to work a lot in Fitzroy Housing Estate.
Really?
So
in Napier Street?
Up the top end of Brunswick Street, between sort of Gertrude and Moore, almost. It's a really funny area in a way, because I really noticed the big change in Brunswick Street from the Gertrude Street down to Johnson Street. It's just such a different demographic of people.
And in terms of wealth and fashion.
The opposite. You know, you have the pretty down and outers. You know, I was really, really shocked. I used to work in a place and it involved me giving a lift to this person who was living in the rooming houses up in the top end of Brunswick Street. I don't know if you've ever ventured into those places.
Yeah.
I was pretty sheltered and I thought, you know, I thought I'd been to the hardest of the hard, but I went into this rooming house and I was completely astonished, you know, and it's 2 blocks away from where I live in my comfortable home, and where other people sip cappuccino down the street. There's these people living in these rabbit warrens, paying a lot of rent, and partly that's because I suppose they've got nowhere else to go. Nobody else will, like, I can't imagine a real estate agent in Brunswick Street renting them a house. So they've got nowhere else to go. They pay GST, they live in this crap house. She didn't have proper walls between her room and the next room. There was noise, there was violence. It was just, and she was growing garlic in her room, so I was completely... I had this big, big culture shock, and that's after working with people like that for 5 years. So it was...
What was your job? Social work?
I was working in community art, so I used to organise a little festival in Richmond called the Moon Lantern Festival, which has a little following. It's working with people across the city of Yarra, so some of those would be in Fitzroy. Making lanterns for a very special lantern parade in the evening. So that used to happen every year and people would come, but it's based on an estate. So a lot of my work involved working with people living in public housing. One year we had outdoor cinema in public housing, and I think Fitzroy, we had it in 3 housing estates, Fitzroy, Richmond and Collingwood, and Fitzroy was the most difficult one to manage. We had all these young people, young kids, you know, who were between 5 and 10, who were just down on the estate in the evening without their parents. And one can imagine that they probably didn't have fantastic home environments to go to. So they were just completely off their faces, really, just running around with all this excess energy, trying to tear up the screen or throw rocks at it or make other people have a hard time. But I think one of the most depressing images that I had from that experience was this young kid just throwing bottles against the wall as entertainment, you know. It's pretty full on. And that's 2 blocks from where I live type of thing, or not even 1 block, really. So, I think Fitzroy has a real diverse... I think, and when I say diverse, I think diverse has become a word that doesn't really mean diverse anymore because it's used so much, but it's really 2 extremes, I think, in Fitzroy. I mean, in my 5 years of living there, I've seen property prices just rise beyond belief, you know. So nobody else who can live there except people who can afford to buy in or rent or live in public housing. So you have 2 very different...
So I suppose the public housing keeps the diversity area, it keeps the rents down.
I think so. I think there's some real challenges in public housing. You know, I don't think anybody can say that it's a perfect marriage, you know, that people live happily in their little flats and what wonderful lives they had type of thing. I think it's a pretty hard reality for a lot of people because the view is fantastic, and I'm sure if anybody can convert it into apartment blocks, you know, it'd be wonderful. So it just needs money to be put in to make those environments for people good, you know, and that's what it is, you know. I think when there's an environment like this, it's very hard for people who live in it to feel that they own the space, that they can contribute meaningfully to it rather than go in and lock their door against all the other nasties around them. I think that's really, really hard. I know a lot of people who work supporting people who are underprivileged, and I really admire all the strength, courage and energy that they have in it. But it's a really big thing because it's very antisocial, all the things around there. You know, the people who bought $500,000 houses in Fitzroy don't want that sort of environment, and I can understand that. But the other side is that there are people who've lived in public housing for a long, long time and have just as much right to be there, even though they can't afford the $500,000 houses. And the other thing is that, you know, there's always this complaint that Fitzroy is becoming gentrified and losing the edge that everybody comes to Fitzroy for. And I think that's part of it, you know, when you try to make a place a certain way. It's like putting window boxes out in the window to make things pretty. It loses that other quality, that wildness that it has too. So I don't think it's quite there yet. I don't think it's completely gentrified.
So you see that as the biggest threat to Fitzroy, or the things that...
Well, I think communities form and then dissolve and then go away somewhere else, you know, I think, or reform. I think people can make things happen if they want it to, but I think you can't force people to make it a certain type of community, I think. So I think, I don't know what will happen to Fitzroy. I don't know if it'll become the Toorak of the side of the river or something, or if it already isn't. I think it has its own life, and we'll see what happens to it. But, you know, I love living in Fitzroy for lots of reasons. One of them being that I don't have to drive everywhere. I walk to work or across the park, and I have a fairly suburban life in a sense because I can walk to places. But also having that access, you know, it's just great. Is that it?
Yeah, that's it. Thanks so much.
Good luck.